Welcome to Landman Now, where you can re-energize with those who lead the way for the land profession. Landman Now, podcasting the profession, is presented by the American Association of Professional Landmen, the essential community for all who perform or are associated with land work. Landman Now starts now.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Landman Now. Today, I have with me Carl Campbell and Brian Tolson. Thank you for joining us today. If you wouldn't mind, just introduce yourselves to the audience a little bit.
Sure, Chad, thanks. Carl Campbell, I'm with Alamo Resources in Houston.
I'm Brian Tolson. I'm a partner with Equitas Energy Partners. We're out of the Fort Worth area and we do land service work.
Well, thank you. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you, because a lot of people are probably interested in the land profession, but maybe don't know exactly what it is a landman does. So if you could tell me, what is a landman and how does that role fit into energy development?
Well, a landman basically is the kind of the face of an oil and gas company. Probably the first person that a mineral owner or a landowner might interface with is a land professional. And also on the company side, talking to other professionals within the industry, there usually is a representative, either a geologist or engineer land that's involved at the very early stages of discussion in joint ventures.
Carl hit it right on the head. That's what we do. We just go out there and introduce ourselves, being the forward face of the industry and meet mineral owners, surface owners, other operators. So we're just kind of that voice piece for the industry.
So in a lot of ways, the first person that someone meets within the energy industry is a lot of times probably a landman.
Yes, yeah,
absolutely.
So.
And so what would you say are some of the core responsibilities of a company landman?
Well, that's a broad brush, a pretty wide spectrum. But a company landman has evolved over time, and consequently, we used to be, our industry was more focused on prospects and projects that were focused in a geographical area, but had a geographic constraint. There's now, with the shale plays going on across the country in various basins, that's a lot more expansive. So consequently, the land professional has kind of evolved in the role to be a logistics meister, if you will, because they have to interface with, regulatory, operations, engineering, geology, and all of those things have to be set up specifically in a certain cadence and timing so that the project will be successful and the drilling schedule will not be interrupted. Because if you have one failure along the chain, it can throw things off considerably, and those are always not pleasant discussions to have. So it's amazing to see what a land professional does, and the breadth that actually of other disciplines that he has to touch and interface with, he or she has to interface with.
And it's pretty interesting just to kind of see the difference between the in-house and the field landman, right? So on the field side, we don't have as much contact with the other, side of the industry, the geologists, the petroleum engineers, but when we go out there, and our role is really to go out there a lot of times to research the records. So once the in-house group puts together their area of interest, we'll go out there and try to build that position. So we're going to go to the courthouse, we're going to do title research, and title research kind of revolves around going in there, finding the patent. So it's going to be the first time the state sold land to the first individual. We're going to find that, bring title all the way forward, looking at every deed, every lease, every mortgage. I mean, there's tons of records in those courthouses. If you've ever been into one, there's just volumes upon volumes of books and records that we have to shuffle through to build that end result, who owns what, where, what depths. And then we also send out guys, we're kind of the boots on the ground that'll go out into the field and talk to each one of the mineral owners and surface owners. And we have to build that relationship with them. So that's a big role that we have as field landman to set that up.
Yeah, it's interesting, Brian, you bring up a great point, because that's one of the most interesting aspects when I got started in my career. Started out in the field, obviously, to try and get exposure and buying leases and working for a brokerage firm when I was in school during the summers. And going into those, kind of musty old vaults in the courthouses and working through pulling, land indexes and pulling books to try and put and chain together title. It's kind of like an Indiana Jones discovery, right? You kind of go back and you feel like you're really touching history of sorts. And so I think it's a fantastic aspect. I hope every land professional gets that opportunity. I know now things have really evolved and everything's done online, but you know, a field trip to an old courthouse is worth it every once in a while.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You ever been chased out of a courthouse by cannibals? Or?
I'm not gonna talk about that. No.
Some of
By
those-
cannibals, did you say?
Leave that to
Oh,
Indiana
yeah, we'll
Jones.
leave that to someone else.
It's
Exactly.
interesting. Some of them
Yeah.
you're in, they'll have, you know, their district court set up right next door, and they will sometimes walk prisoners in and check them in and out, and you kind of look over your shoulder a little bit just to kind of see how bad is this dude or lady that's coming in behind me while I'm trying to read these books. So you will see that occasionally.
No, you didn't expect that coming.
No, once you've been to a few of those courthouses, you get ready for it. You know, if they're doing that same type activity in the clerk's office or what they're doing. So
Yeah.
Keeps your head on a swivel.
keep
right?
your head on a swivel.
Yeah, that's right.
So, what would you say are some of the skills that you find essential for a company landman?
Well, it's a great question. I would say the analytical skills are very, very important. You know, the detail-oriented person is going to do extremely well because you're dealing with contracts. You're putting together, in some cases, joint venture agreements with other companies. So a lot rides on that, and you really need to make sure that you're understanding what you're drafting or what you're reading to provide feedback on changes to the agreement. But on top of that, interpersonal skills are very important because you're interfacing with, as we mentioned earlier, a lot of different disciplines within the organization. And so it's kind of a broad breadth of skill sets that you need in-house, but that doesn't really differ from it's applied differently for field guys.
It is. I mean, he hit it right on the head. You have to be detail oriented in what we do. I mean, you're calculating interest based off, you know, decimals that are way out, and if you're slightly off, you can pay somebody too much money or not enough money whenever you take those leases. So the detail oriented piece is serious. Also, on the field side, you have to have some thick skin. You do. You're going to be out trying to buy minerals or lease interest, and it's a hard job sometimes. You get told no a lot, and you've got to learn how to kind of persevere through it. You know, maybe you don't get the exact deal you wanted. Maybe you wanted all of it, but you got to figure out how to work it, and maybe you get half of the deal, or you know, build that relationship. But thick skin's pretty important as well on our side.
Yeah, you get turned down quite a bit.
You get
before
turned
you get
down a lot.
yes.
You do, but that yes is a win.
Yeah.
It's a fist bump in the air, you know.
Yeah.
Have that little celebration.
Makes it worth it, yeah. How would you describe a typical project or assignment for a company landman, and how would you say that contrasts to a field landman?
I'll take a stab at that, Brian. You know, I think the differences, I mean, usually you're collaborative with, as we mentioned earlier, several different disciplines within your organization. And so usually a project or a project area is defined by a geologist or engineer, and so you want to move forward with development of that area. So you're working in concert with them to see, one, is there land available? In a lot of the shale plays, obviously the land is completely tied up by other companies. So then you have to look at, how do I acquire that? By virtue of working trades with other companies that may own an existing interest, and see if they want to work with you or farm out an interest to you. So you know, it covers a lot of different silos that you need to kind of work with to identify the viability of that project.
So, you know, from our standpoint, a lot of the roles that we have, obviously they identify that area, and like I mentioned a while ago, we go out, we run the title, we identify all the owners, all depth, surface, things of that nature. With the research, we'll do the leasing out there. We also have kind of the responsibility to try to perfect title in a certain aspect. So once that initial research is done, the interest is leased, the company decides to drill, usually there's been title opinions rendered on that land, and those title opinions come back with a lot of requirements. And these are the, you know, steps that the attorney believes that if we can cure those items, then we've got really good marketable title, right? And you're not always going to get it perfect, but that's another role that we run into is having individuals go back and try to clean up that, whether it's a correction deed or finding probates from other counties or affidavit of heirship, things of that nature that'll clean it up a lot. So that's one other aspect that we kind of get into as far as a project or role that we have. outside of the leasing and research.
Okay. And you mentioned trading prospects. How often does that happen? Is that
A lot.
A lot?
Yeah, well, I mean, differing land positions that companies own, I mean, you have to interface with them to see if there's the possibility of formulating a trade. Maybe it's not high on their radar to get that developed immediately, or it's in a different queue. They've got capital constraints or capital commitments in different areas. And so you want to move forward in this area, and there's a way to maybe accelerate that by bringing virtue your capital or buying that particular interest from them so that it can be developed while they retain some sort of interest, whether it's a reversionary or a override or whatever the case may be. And a lot of these things we're discussing with each other, it's kind of a 30,000 foot flyover. It gets a lot more detailed than that, but trying to give you a flavor for the general differences of what you went into.
Absolutely, we see that too, kind of from the title aspect. You see these groups come in and they're trying to build units, right? So now they're drilling 2, 3, 4 mile, long lateral wells, and that encompasses a lot of acreage, right? So if you can imagine a subdivision being within that box, or multiple 20-acre tracts, whatever it is, those tracts aren't going to all be owned by Carl's company. There's going to be multiple companies that are in there, and maybe Carl's company wants to build a larger position in there, so that's where they'll start trading those leases out to try to block it up a little bit, increase their numbers and their return.
Yeah.
And it's key to know what that ownership is, and that's where Brian's professional services come in and become so valuable. He and his team are building out title so that we fully understand what kind of implications or who we want to deal with or don't want to deal with, as the case may be. But it's critically important to have a firm understanding of title, and so the role of the field landman, field professional, is vitally important.
Right. Hand in hand there.
Mm-hmm.
So how does a landman interact with other energy professionals such as geologists and engineers? Is that more of is that a day-to-day basis? Is that a weekly basis, or is that just as needed? Or
I think it depends on the personality of the company, because I think that varies from company to company. But in some really large organizations, they're probably a little bit more sequestered or siloed off and more interface with just other land professionals. But in mid to smaller size companies, you're crossing those boundaries quite a bit, interfacing with the geologist or the engineer or your regulatory specialist or your operations guys, and so you're working on a daily basis with them, usually, just depending on how intense the project is and what you've got focused. In other areas, when it's maybe you're in between projects and you're trying to build together a land position, then you might not interface with them. So it just depends on the cadence and really the intent of the project you're faced with.
We don't interface with them a whole lot unless they're the mineral owner and we've got to go get a lease from them. But no, I mean, if it's a large company, we're not going to talk with them a whole lot. If it's a smaller mom and pop operation where you'll see a lot of times a brokerage with field landman almost act as an in-house landman sometimes for smaller groups that can't afford their own land department. So in those cases, we will talk more with the whole team. There'll usually be weekly meetings, and we'll go in and it's more us sitting in and listening and understanding kind of their point of view on everything, but we don't have a whole lot of interaction there. The biggest one that you'll probably see on our side is when we're running title and you start having depth severances and there's well markers at certain depths and this formation's been reserved. Well, sometimes we need that help from a geologist to tell us, okay, what formation are we in at 4,500 feet below the surface, right?
Yeah.
So that's usually the biggest question that we have. We kind of operate on our own for the most part.
okay, and this next question it's probably pretty broad, but I think everybody faces challenges in their day-to-day work. What are some of the common challenges that a landman might face in their day-to-day work?
Well, you're right. That's a pretty broad brush. I think that one that pops to mind for me is the regulatory hurdles that you're faced with. As we've seen, there has been more pressure on that front over the last 10 to 15 years, and so consequently that can really impact your rig schedule, your development schedule, and so those challenges of trying to make sure that you've got everything all, your T's crossed and I's dotted, become incredibly important as far as when you're dealing with regulatory agencies, governmental agencies that can basically either approve or shut you down on the development pace that you're trying to achieve?
I'd say on our side, the biggest hurdle we encounter regularly is going to be kind of the logistics of getting to those courthouses. Some courthouses do not have any remote access. So a group hasn't gone in there and imaged it and we can jump online. It's really, we've got to go back to the old school books and get in there. So when you have a remote county in the middle of nowhere, West Texas, well, the key is for us to find people that can get to that courthouse at a reasonable cost without tons of mileage and hotel expenses and the like. So logistics is pretty tough on our part, especially if, you know, a group comes in there and they want us to go lease in a certain area. So, you know, not everything we do isn't oil and gas. On the field side, we're definitely into renewables, solar, you know, wind, and the other industries that are out there. So in order to get those, you have to communicate with that surface owner, and they want boots there. So we have to find landmen that are local to that area that can go in and have those conversations. In most cases, we can bring in people and house them and things like that, but it's a lot easier if you have a individual that's familiar with the culture of that area, and you'd be surprised how much it changes from state to state and county to county. You probably see all those political maps, red and blue. It's a different type of person everywhere you go. So,
Plus, I can imagine, as you're saying, in a pretty remote location where everything is
there's
analog.
not a lot of people anyway.
Yeah, and everything's analog, so you might be out there a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So
Good, and that's another thing. Having thick skin, you've got to have some individuals that are willing to go out there and be in that courthouse 5 days a week. You know, doing the research, because everything we do it's hair on fire. I mean, you're competing against the other group and the other operator trying to get the same lease. So it is a race at all times.
yeah.
The old adage, race to the courthouse, is alive and well.
It
No question
is.
about it.
So that's definitely a big hurdle that we encounter, and finding the people that can do the work. That's always tough too.
Well, finding the people, that kind of segues my next question, because there are a lot of young people who graduating and may be interested in the land industry. Some questions relate more to them is, what is the typical career path for a landman? Is there a job that they can easily transition from to a landman, or somebody looking to join? Is there certain college courses that they should be interested in?
Well, sure, and that's also a very good question. I think the key, we've got through AAPL a fantastic network of accredited universities that have wonderful programs established. And so the student that's in school that is interested in the energy platform has a lot of options at one of those universities to get kind of deep in the weeds and pursue that opportunity. We see some outstanding students that are continuing to come through the program. One of the things that we want to maintain is encouraging other younger students to get involved in the program, because there's been probably the last 10 to 15 years as well pushback on just, you know, conventional energy sources and having kind of a bad reputation, which is not fair. It's something that we're going to be using this energy, which keeps basically the U.S. and the world the lights on for decades upon decades to come, and we see into the next century. So there's no timing issue that's going to be phased out, but some people were concerned that, you know, there was that timing was going to come to a twilight, and it's the opposite of that. Study after study have indicated that you know, we're going to be using traditional energy sources for many decades to come, and will continue to do so. So I would encourage people that might feel like, well, we don't think that's going to be around for long, to reevaluate and reassess their position there, because there's a fabulous future. And, you know, for people that really have the desire to pursue that avenue, I think the sky's the limit for them too, because that need will continue to grow over time.
So like Carl was touching on, the accredited universities that are, you know, set up with AAPL, that's where we go find a lot of our talent. We'll go to those colleges. They'll have programs like Meet the Industry and specific, you know, degree plans that they'll take. They kind of change the names from here to there, but they revolve around land management in all those cases. And it's been really neat to kind of go in there over the last, I think we've been participating probably the last 6-7 years, and just seeing kind of with all the cool schools pushing diversity, and you're seeing people that didn't even know what a landman was come into it. So you're getting all different people from all different walks of life coming in, and it's neat to see that. So I think it's open to any individual. But you know, one of the things that we try to push really hard, one way or the other, is if you want to be a landman, getting some experience in the field is pretty important. That way you understand how long it takes to run title, you understand what you're asking for, because there are a number of reports that we can build, and each one of them take a different amount of time, and you need to learn the right way to run title and find, you know, blanket conveyances or whatnot out there. And if you're just kind of cheating through it and using an abstract plan, you know, you might miss some real relevant pieces. So it's important for me to know that everybody understands that if you're doing it right and you're finding all those documents, it takes time. So, you know, if you can get an internship with a brokerage and learn a little bit about that, and then go in-house, and I think you're going to be, you know, just set up for success all the way around. You're going to know what you're talking about when you ask for things, and I think a large number of in-house landmen do have a role at some point, or the companies send their individuals into the field to learn it a little while. So it's a good aspect.
Yeah, it's critically important. I think to expound upon what we were just discussing, you know, this is really not an energy transition, it's an energy expansion. And the needs for, you know, as AI and all of these other technologies continue to develop, our energy grid is going to continue to grow, not shrink. And so that opens up wonderful opportunities across the spectrum. As Brian had mentioned earlier, you know, whether that's renewables, which we think that's all part of the fuel stack, but renewables and traditional sources of oil and gas are very, very important for the livelihood of our nation and world as we move forward.
And Brian, you touched on it a little bit about just different kinds of people coming into the industry now. It's no longer just a kid who grew up in Midland that knows about the energy industry. It's all over now. I mean, and with the expansion into renewables, you could have people growing up all over the country who can get into this industry and really have a knowledge of it now.
And learning, I mean, and it goes beyond that too. I mean, there's hard mineral mining, there's timber rights. I mean, you can use the skill set you learn as a landman in so many different industries. It's really, you know, revolves around real estate law, right? I mean, you can do a number of things with it. So,
and I think another thing that young people are always interested in going into an industry is the fact that the energy industry pays really well. It is a huge plus for the industry to let people know, hey, this is a career that you can get in and make a good living doing.
No question. I mean, it can be very financially rewarding, and that's one of the things that we're seeing. Starting salaries of students that are graduating from energy management programs across the country. Boy, I would have liked to have had that kind of a starting salary when I got started. But you know, I think it's just it adds to exactly what you're saying. There's a really bright future, and it provides for them and their families if they choose to develop one over time. So I think that it provides a lot of options, no question about it.
It definitely does. And you know, just to kind of put a tag in there, I mean, I think if you go on to landman.org, they do compensation studies. AAPL does every couple of years, I believe is what it is. So yeah, you can get on there and see, you know, how much you can make starting out year 1 through 5 and 5 through 10. And then if you have different designations, if you've got the RPL or CPL, it keeps expanding with that and kind of goes on. And it can be relative, kind of going back to those logistical things. Like if you're in a remote spot, you're probably worth a lot more than somebody that, you know, is downtown Fort Worth. There's 100 people here that I can pick from. There might only be one out there in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, that kind of speaks to it. So it's always a kind of topic that you've got to work through on a case-by-case scenario.
And one of those points as you get into the industry, and the certification that's provided by, you know, the association, the AAPL association, obviously is incredibly helpful. And it also is rewarded financially as you move up the ladder in certification, because it shows your dedication to your profession and the desire to always grow and expand your knowledge base.
Yeah, I think the CPL on average, people who have a CPL earn $36,000 more. I mean, that's a huge.
I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that cited before, and I don't doubt it.
You know, another aspect of that is, you know, one of the key differences too between what we do is a lot of field landmen are independent contractors. So a lot of them have their own company set up, their own LLC, and they get to kind of have that freedom to run their company as they see fit, which obviously the ones that work hard, put in the time and effort and make a good name for themselves, they're going to succeed and do better. But it is kind of unique that you can kind of set up your own company, run it how you want, and you know, that's you can have brokerages that are out there that have a number of individuals underneath them that, you know, kind of keep workload going in and keep things in the pipelines. But there are also individuals that are true independent, and they're just hopping from group to group and making their way on their own. So
what's cool about that is the fact that if you are an independent, you join AAPL, you still have that ability to have a community. Whereas a lot of industries, if you're doing freelance photography, you may not be interfacing with a lot of, you know, other photographers in that way. But I think that with the Landmen, there is a very strong bond between.
No doubt. I think you raise a great point, Chad. I mean, I think the collaboration that we have between field and in-house landmen are, you know, it's probably the best it's ever been, because it is so interrelated, and we rely on each other a lot. But it's one of those things that's been fun to see that develop and strengthen over time too.
it's, I mean, what we do and we're involved in has to be one of the biggest industries in the world, but it is a small world, I'll tell you that. I mean, when we go to NAPE or you go to any of these quarterly events or annual events, you know, you get to know everybody, and it turns into a small world quick. So it's kind of neat in that aspect that you build some neat relationships with individuals that you serve on different committees with or boards with, and they become more like friends than you know, competitors or coworkers. I mean, it's really neat.
Yeah, it's a very cool community.
It's, yeah, not only financially but personally rewarding. It really is. And from exactly that point that Brian was espousing, it's one of those things. I've developed some great friendships over the arc of my career, and a lot of those have been my association with the local and of course with the AAPL, because it's provided the opportunity to meet and develop friendships that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to otherwise. So if you get involved, stay involved, and get more involved, because it really, really helps you professionally and personally,
Yeah.
I think.
So our last question here is, how is the role of Landman involved with the different energy technologies and things like that have come into the industry? I know you touched on AI a little bit,
Mhm.
and that's a huge one. What would you say some of that and some of the other ones are?
Well, that and the results of AI, we're just kind of walking down that you know, that plank right now, trying to figure out where that's going to go and where it's going to lead. I mean, it does have apparently, you know, infinite possibilities, but we also have to think about being properly harnessed, because you always have to have a discerning mind to be able to say, is the information that's being provided to me, does that make sense? And so the only way that you know that is by your own knowledge base. And if you're just relying on AI to generate something for you, you're doing yourself and whoever you're working for a disservice. But I think that it can be an incredibly helpful tool, time saver. There are a lot of different applications that we're seeing, from lease administration, contract administration, things of that in-house, that I think AI is going to be incredibly helpful over the time, and it basically is a leveraging of resources. So one person can do what maybe three people have done before, but that means that frees up more people to have other expansive ideas and opportunities to pursue other projects.
Yeah, you have to be able to check that what it did was right still. You
Oh,
have to have
absolutely.
that
You know,
knowledge
garbage in,
and
garbage
skills.
out,
Yeah,
the old saying
exactly.
goes, is true. So but you've gotta have the underlying base to does this make sense?
Yeah.
Can you follow that logic train? But I think from a resource standpoint, it's gonna be incredibly helpful
Yeah.
over time.
So I guess it depends on how you define AI, and I'm still educating myself on all that. But I think one of the key parts of that helps us tremendously is that I've seen, and it's got to get better, right? But the optical recognition. So you've got these programs that are going in and picking out either clauses or, you know, who is the grantor, who is the grantee, and it'll pull that data out and set it up, you know, in a simple format for you to kind of go through, but you've got to make sure that it's interpreting that clause right and it's picking out the right one. I think they're getting better with that every day, but that's a huge advantage. You still need an individual go double check it. But what Carl touched on earlier, that we have a lot of these groups that are coming in and imaging entire courthouses. So while it may not be technology, it kind of is. We're gaining access to a lot more records that we can review and research remotely, which is outstanding in my opinion. There are pros and cons to it. When I came into the industry, really went to the courthouse every day. You built relationships with individuals at the courthouse, other landmen. You're in there. I mean, you get it done, right? Now with all this remote access, you lose that aspect of being in there and being able to compare notes and make sure your product's perfect as easily. You can still do it through team meetings and things of that nature, but I think the piece that helps out more than anything is on your family life side. I think that's the part that I saw change so much over probably the last 10, 11 years, is that, when you're in the courthouse, you're gone Monday through Friday, guaranteed every week. Now you get to be home with your kids, you get to go to practices and games, and I mean, it's outstanding. That's something that's pretty important. I've talked to my daughter about it. She's interested, but not interested, but she's looking for something that she's heard all these terms, remote work, and she's like, well, I kind of want that opportunity, and I'm like, well, Landman has that, if that's her cup of tea, but being able to work from home, have a family life, take care of business, it creates some great opportunities there.
Yeah, not being on the road nearly as much.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a game changer from a work-life balance prospect. I mean, it's one of those things that I think also encourages more people to get involved.
Absolutely.
Because they don't feel like they're going to be out, gone for a week to 2 weeks at a time. They can interface with their family and spend quality family time together.
Absolutely, you can bring on better talent for sure, but
yeah.
God, I miss those good old days, leaving the courthouse at 5 and getting 9 in with all the boys, playing a little golf and or shooting some clays, whatever it came out to be. We always had a good time. We made the best of it.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap up, I want to do our quick 2-minute drill with you.
Okay.
Carl, I'll start with you. What is your craziest story from the field?
That list is too long to enumerate for you, Chad. I mean, there's been some interesting experiences. I think all of those are valuable. From chasing down mineral owners across the country and various areas of the country in unusual circumstances, to the ability of being able to collaborate with other industry professionals on some projects that you didn't think were possible prior to that. I won't go into detail about it, but it provides for a lot of entertainment over time. I mean, one of those things that we talked about when we were out spending time in the field more often than we are now. It's usually there's always a few takeaways that you can put in your quill to remember and memorialize that opportunity.
I'm a true field landman, so we got to keep things close to the vest. Can't kiss and tell. We got all kinds of stories and secrets, but you don't make it as a field guy by telling all your stories. But running into issues where maybe there's somebody prisoner coming through, or another thing that's really interesting is when you're running title, you get to dig up a lot of information on a lot of people's personal lives. You'll read probates that have some interesting twists, and you'll see affidavits of airship talking about Comanche raids, and I mean there's quite a bit that you can dive into. But those crazy stories, you just got to become a landman and get out there a little bit and see what it's all about.
If you want to know, you got to join.
That's right. True statement.
What is your most memorable deal, and is there one that got away or one that keeps you up at night?
Well, there's a lot of the ones that got away, Chad. Unfortunately, I mean that's quite a laundry list for me. But I think one that stands out is when my business partner Tony Peltier and I co-founded Alamo Resources back in 2004, and one of our first acquisitions was an offshore acquisition, and we weren't really intent on being an offshore company when we formulated. We'd known each other for 16 years before we formed a partnership, but worked together at another company for a number of years, and we were pretty well calibrated. But this opportunity came at us pretty quickly, and we were able to work very rapidly in getting the deal consummated and closed within a remarkable amount of time, especially offshore, 45 days after running through everything, including, we closed that with all equity and no debt. So it was one of those really rewarding opportunities to kind of as a cornerstone for our company. And it's pretty long in tooth now, but we actually still have it under management currently. So it's been one of those projects that's been with us for a long time. But that stands out for me.
It's a great way to start.
Yeah, it was a great way to get the company and our organization kicked off for sure.
Yeah, on our side, every deal's the biggest deal. If it's we need to get every last lease that we can, or acquire every interest that we can. Everyone's a big one. Everyone that we lose is a big loss. I mean, it really doesn't matter. We've got to have everyone that we are asked to get, and that's probably the key there. But as far as success, things that stand out is Blaine and myself getting into Equitas and just building a brokerage. It's not easy, building one and keeping it going and thriving through the ups and down cycles that the industry has. So that's probably just kind of our only big win right there. Everything else is equal, on wins and losses.
That's funny you bring that up, but we have a moniker for that. We call it cycle tested.
Mm-hmm.
And you wear that as a badge of honor, because we've seen many of these ups and downs, but over time that you can survive even the times that look that really dramatic, and those were probably more volatile in the past than they are now. But being able to walk through those cycles is very, very important.
It is. It's huge. I mean, I had family members that told me not to get into the industry because it's too cyclical. And when I made the decision to get into it, I was like, I'm going to weather one downturn. I'm going to come out on the other side so strong. And I think we've weathered two or three, and it's always, it makes you feel good.
And you're much stronger.
Much stronger.
Yeah,
lose all my hair. It's all gray now, but that's nature of the beast.
Well, at least
but it's
you
fun.
have hair. That's the good thing. So, it's great.
What do you think?
Yeah, I'm talking about me. That wasn't a personal question. Please. Yeah.
Okay, if you weren't a land professional, what would you be?
Oh, I have no other skill sets. I'd probably live under that bridge out there under 7th Street. In honesty, I'd probably have pursued something in finance, so that would have been something. But I never look back. My decision that I made, my father was a geologist, so it was part of my DNA. I knew I couldn't be a geologist. I didn't have the same skill set that my father had. But the business aspect of the land business spoke to me, and so I never look back and regret that decision, and glad I made it.
I would absolutely be in the real estate world. That's where I cut my teeth immediately out of college. Obtained my real estate license to sell here in Texas. Did a lot of residential transactions, some land, things of that nature, and ended up talking with a really good buddy of mine that was a geologist, and he goes, man, you really need to look at being a landman. It's the same thing, but it's fine-tuned quite a bit. And so that's where I got into it. I would never look back. I love it. But the two industries, the legal aspect, it would probably take me right back to real estate, that industry, whether it was real estate development or sales or something to that effect.
There's a lot of common DNA.
A lot of common DNA. They are.
Yeah. So who would you say is your energy idol?
Well, there's so many wonderful professionals out there that I hold in the highest esteem. Got a pretty long list of people that I look up to. Two people that pop to mind, Harold Hamm, Continental, what he's been able to do is absolutely phenomenal. And then also Robert Zinke, who's been very fundamental or been instrumental in the OU Energy Management Program at OU. And Bob and I had the opportunity to work with my business partner on our first acquisition together too, which was very rewarding. So always think very highly of him as well. So those are two that pop to mind.
Very cool.
With Without a doubt, my wife. She has the most energy of anybody I know, and that's
Oh
that.
boy, you really put me in the doghouse, Brian. Thanks for that one.
She's it. She puts up with me, the kids, keeps us in line. No, in all honesty, we get to work with a lot of groups and a lot of talented individuals that run monster companies down to small companies. And what I see from each one of those leaders of those companies is just a different skill set that I want to take something away from each one of them. They all have great aspects and attributes. So everybody that I've worked for, I've really enjoyed learning something from them.
Okay, if you could go back in time, would you choose a different path? Would you prefer to be field or in-house or field? Would you?
I think the path that I was lucky enough to stumble upon and be involved in over the length of my career is where I needed to be. So no, I don't look at it as coulda, woulda, shoulda, or if I'd had a different opportunity. I think I've enjoyed the pathway. Some of it's been good, some of it's not so good, but on whole, it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience.
I wouldn't trade for the world. I love the field side. Love what we do every day. I love solving problems, and that's the name of the game for us. So I wouldn't trade it all. I don't think I could make it as an in-house landman. I'm not good looking. I'm not well spoken, but I can make it out in the fields with some of the farmers and stuff. So it works out good.
We're not buying what you're selling on that front, buddy. Yeah. You cut a really wide swath.
Man, I had to clean up big time for this
Good,
interview
buddy.
here. So.
You look good, Brian. Yeah.
Well, last question here. Both of you have obviously been very involved with AAPL. What is your favorite thing about AAPL?
Well, I think, and the people, obviously, the opportunity to we talked about earlier, the ability to meet and develop great, not only professional networking connections, but true friendships is invaluable. But the certification, the education, the advocacy, all of those things that AAPL represents, and it's wonderful to be a member of AAPL because you guys are always working for us, for the Landmen, and it's a great organization. And I was a little bit naive. I didn't know until I really got involved just how much the AAPL was involved. So on so many different facets, and you don't get a whole lot of recognition on that. Sometimes it's done quietly. But it's very, very helpful to all of us as professionals for what you do.
Oh, thank you.
I love seeing the causes that AAPL fights for. And like you said, once you get involved, you'll see a lot more of it. And there's too many to even mention here. But, I love seeing the disaster relief. I love seeing the education piece where they're pushing big scholarships to so many kids at so many colleges. And a lot of times I think it's refined to the land industry, but I don't think it always has to go that way. Individuals come out in some different aspects, but man, just seeing that all that effort, money, volunteer time goes to really good causes and helps people as a whole.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's been fun, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting us. I mean, I don't get to come up to headquarters near enough, and look at this beautiful view. The facilities are great.
Spectacular, isn't it?
Spectacular.
Yeah.
It
We need to
is.
spend more time up here at AAPL.
I think they need to make a desk for me over here so I can hang out and feel big sometimes.
Yeah, we greatly appreciate the opportunity to chat with you, Chad. Thank you for carving out the time and doing a great job. So thank you.
Well, we'll have you back anytime. So.
Great. Thanks.
Well, thank you for tuning in. This has been another episode of Landman Now. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Landman Now, podcasting the profession. For more information on the land profession, how to become a landman, AAPL membership and upcoming offerings, visit landman.org. We'd also like to thank our Alliance program partners for supporting Landman Now, as well as our advocacy efforts, educational offerings, and so much more. Our partners include Apache, BPX Energy, Chevron, Coterra, Devon, Expand, EOG Resources, EQT, Equinor, Oventive, and Oxy. Until next time, keep exploring.